Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. The scent of roasted garlic and rosemary always made our house feel more like a home, and tonight it was working overtime, mingling with the low hum of conversations and the clinking of ice in glasses. Our annual summer party was in full swing. Tom, my husband, bless his heart, had been a bundle of nerves all week, not because of the 20-odd people currently milling about our living room and patio, but because of one particular guest, Arthur Caldwell, his boss. Mr. Caldwell. Even in my own thoughts, he was still Mr. Caldwell, a man whose reputation for being a demanding, no-nonsense CEO preceded him like a thunderclap. Tom had worked for him for nearly a decade, and while he respected the man, there was always an undercurrent of, well, fear isn't quite the right word, more like a profound wariness. I smoothed down the front of my linen dress, a soft blue that usually made me feel calm, and scanned the room. Tom was deep in conversation with some neighbors, a practiced social smile on his face, but I could see the slight tension in his shoulders. He'd catch my eye every so often, and I'd give him what I hoped was a reassuring nod. We were a team, Tom and I, especially in these social endeavors that were more his work obligation than our shared pleasure. Not that I minded hosting. I usually enjoyed the bustle, the chance to catch up with friends, the excuse to try out new recipes. But tonight, the air felt a little more charged. Mr. Caldwell was, as expected, holding court near the large French doors that opened onto the garden. He wasn't loud or boisterous, quite the opposite. He had a way of speaking in measured tones that made everyone lean in, a quiet command that probably served him well in the boardroom. He was a tall man, distinguished, with silver hair that was impeccably neat and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. I'd only met him a handful of times at company events, always brief, polite exchanges. He was perfectly courteous, of course, but there was an invisible barrier, an aura of untouchable authority. Tonight, in our home, that aura felt magnified. I'd spent the better part of the day making sure everything was just so. The garden was looking its best, the hydrangeas bursting with color, the string lights Tom had painstakingly hung casting a warm, inviting glow as dusk began to settle. Inside, the buffet table was laden with food, my famous miniature quiches, a new salmon pâté I was rather proud of, salads, cheeses, and a mountain of fresh bread from the local bakery. I'd even remembered to put out the little name cards for the cheeses, something I usually forgot until the last minute. It was silly, perhaps, to put so much effort into impressing Tom's boss, but it wasn't just for Tom's career. It was about creating a welcoming space, a place where everyone could relax, even a man like Arthur Caldwell. Or so I hoped. As I circulated, refilling a bowl of olives here, offering a napkin there, I found my gaze drifting back to Mr. Caldwell. He was listening intently to young Michael Perry from Tom's department, who was gesturing enthusiastically while explaining some new project. Mr. Caldwell nodded occasionally, his expression unreadable. Was he genuinely interested, or was this the practiced attention of a CEO gathering data? I wondered what it would be like to really talk to him, beyond the polite, lovely party, Sarah, or your home is very charming. What did a man like that think about when he wasn't steering a multi-million-dollar company? Did he have hobbies? Did he ever just put his feet up and watch a silly movie? It was hard to imagine. My friend Clara sidled up to me, a mischievous glint in her eye. "He's not so scary up close, is he?" she whispered, nodding discreetly towards Mr. Caldwell. A bit like a stern eagle, but an eagle nonetheless. I chuckled softly. "I wouldn't know, Clara. I've been too busy making sure the canapes don't run out." I picked up an empty platter. Duty calls. The kitchen provided a momentary sanctuary. I took a deep breath, the scent of warm pastry still lingering. From here, the party was a muted symphony of laughter and chatter. I started arranging more smoked salmon crostini on the platter, my mind replaying the image of Mr. Caldwell. Tom had mentioned, almost in passing, that Mr. Caldwell's wife had passed away a few years ago. A sudden illness, I think he'd said. It was a brief, humanizing detail in the otherwise formidable persona of the man. I wondered if the sharpness in his eyes, the reserve, was a shield built from grief. Or perhaps he was just naturally that way. I thought about my own little corner of the house, the small sunroom that doubled as my art studio. It was a bit cluttered, a canvas with a half-finished landscape propped on the easel, tubes of paint and brushes scattered on a nearby table. It was my escape, my private world where I could lose myself for hours. I hadn't touched a brush in weeks, though. Life, as it often does, had gotten in the way. Work commitments. I did part-time bookkeeping for a local charity, family obligations, and then the preparations for this very party. Looking back, I realized I often put my own passions on the back burner, telling myself I'd get to them later. Later, when Tom wasn't so stressed. Later, when the garden was perfect. Later, when the house was spotless. There was always a later. With the platter reloaded, I pasted on my hostess' smile and headed back towards the living room. As I passed the doorway to the hall that led to the den and bedrooms, I noticed it was slightly ajar. I usually kept that part of the house closed off during parties, just to keep things contained. I pushed it gently, intending to close it more firmly, and then I saw him. Mr. Caldwell. He wasn't in the hallway, but had stepped just inside the den, our den. My heart did a little flutter kick of surprise, and for a moment, I just stood there, unseen in the slightly dimmer light of the hall. He wasn't looking at the family photos on the wall, or the shelves crammed with Tom's collection of antique maps. His attention was fixed on something in the far corner, my easel, and the unfinished painting of the coastline near where I grew up. He was standing very still, his hands clasped behind his back, his head tilted slightly as he regarded the canvas. There was no one else around. The sounds of the party seemed to fade into a distant murmur. It felt like an incredibly private moment, and I knew I should probably make my presence known, clear my throat, something. But I couldn't. I was rooted to the spot, a strange mixture of apprehension and an even stranger curiosity holding me captive. What was he thinking? Was he judging my amateurish brushstrokes? My unfinished work? It felt like he was looking at a part of me that I kept hidden, not just from guests, but increasingly, even from myself. And that's when he moved, slowly, taking a step closer to the easel, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. I must have made a small sound, maybe my breath caught, because he turned then, not with a start, but with a slow, deliberate movement. His eyes met mine. They weren't stern or critical as I'd half expected. There was something else in them, something I couldn't quite decipher. A flicker of surprise, perhaps, but also a kind of quiet contemplation. He didn't say anything immediately, and neither did I. The silence stretched, filled only by the faint strains of music from the living room and the frantic thumping of my own heart. I felt my cheeks flush, embarrassed to be caught observing him, and even more embarrassed that he was looking at my very personal, very incomplete painting. He offered a small, almost hesitant smile, a completely unexpected expression that softened the sharp lines of his face. And then he spoke, his voice quiet, but it landed with the weight of something far more significant than the casual setting would suggest. "This is yours, Sarah?" he asked, his gaze shifting from me back to the canvas, then to me again. It wasn't an accusation or even a simple question. There was a tone to it, a resonance that went straight through me, making me feel exposed. And that's when I truly froze, not from fear, but from a profound sense of anticipation, like standing on the edge of an unknown precipice. I had no idea what was about to happen, but I knew, somehow, that this was no ordinary party chit-chat. This was something else entirely. He gestured towards the painting, a seascape I'd been struggling with for months, trying to capture the particular way the light hit the cliffs at sunset. "The light," he said, his voice still quiet, almost a murmur. "You're trying to capture the ephemeral glow just before it fades. That's incredibly difficult." I just stared at him. How could he know? How could this man, this titan of industry, understand the very specific artistic struggle that had kept me returning to this canvas, frustrated but determined? It wasn't a generic comment about a pretty picture. It was a specific observation, one that showed he was truly looking, not just glancing. Yes, I managed, my voice barely a whisper. It's been a challenge." He nodded slowly, his eyes still on the painting. "My late wife, Eleanor," he said, and his voice softened with a tenderness that was so unexpected it made my breath catch. "She was a painter. Landscapes, mostly. She always said the hardest thing was to paint not just what you see, but what you feel about what you see. Especially the light. She called it painting the air." Eleanor. He spoke her name with such reverence, such love. Suddenly, the image of the formidable CEO began to dissolve, replaced by something far more human, far more vulnerable. I saw not Tom's boss, but a man who had loved and lost, a man who understood the language of art, of feeling. "Painting the air," I repeated, the phrase resonating deep within me. "That's a beautiful way to put it." "She would spend hours," he continued, a faint, sad smile playing on his lips, "just watching the light change. She had a little cottage studio, much like this room, I imagine, filled with the smell of turpentine and linseed oil, and canvases in various states of becoming." He looked around my cluttered sunroom, at the tubes of paint, the stained rags, the collection of brushes in old jam jars. His eyes weren't critical, as I'd feared. They were understanding. More than understanding. They held a spark of recognition. "I haven't painted much lately," I confessed, feeling a sudden urge to explain, to share something of myself with this man who was, in a matter of moments, transforming before my eyes. "Life gets busy, you know." "I do know," he said, his gaze returning to me, and there was a depth of empathy in his eyes that was utterly disarming. Eleanor used to say that life was the biggest distraction from living. A bit of a paradox, but I understood what she meant. The things we must do often crowd out the things we need to do for our souls. For our souls. The words hung in the air between us. This wasn't a conversation I had ever imagined having with Arthur Caldwell. It was intimate, profound, and it was happening in the quiet chaos of my own slightly neglected creative space. I felt a warmth spread through me, a connection that was as surprising as it was welcome. He wasn't just seeing a hobby, a pleasant pastime. He was seeing a part of me that I had allowed to become dormant, and he was, in his own quiet way, acknowledging its importance. "She left behind so many unfinished pieces," he went on, his voice tinged with a gentle melancholy. "For a long time, I couldn't bear to look at them. It felt like an accusation. All that beauty," interrupted. He paused, and I could see the effort it took him to continue. "But then I started to see them differently. Not as unfinished, but as moments, captured. Each one a testament to her passion, to her way of seeing the world." He took a step closer to my easel, and for a wild second, I thought he might reach out and touch the canvas. Instead, he just looked at it, really looked. "This light you're chasing," he said, "it's worth chasing, Sarah. Don't let the distractions win for too long." His words were simple, direct, yet they landed with the force of a revelation. It wasn't advice, not really. It was more like permission. Permission to value this part of myself, permission to make space for it again. From the most unexpected of sources. Tom's formidable boss, the man I'd only ever seen as a distant figure of authority, was standing in my messy studio, speaking to my heart in a way few people ever had. The party outside, with its laughter and clinking glasses, felt a million miles away. In this small, sun-drenched room, something significant was shifting within me, a reawakening of sorts, all because Arthur Caldwell had dared to step away from the noise and truly see. I found my voice, though it was still a little shaky. Thank you, Mr. Caldwell, for saying that. For understanding. He turned fully towards me then, and the hesitant smile from before returned, a little more confident this time. Arthur, please, he said. And thank you, Sarah, for sharing your light with me. He gestured again to the painting, even in its becoming. Arthur. The name felt strange on my tongue, yet somehow right in this new context. The formal barrier between us had not just been lowered, it had dissolved. He wasn't just Tom's boss anymore. He was Arthur, a man who understood loss, who appreciated art, and who had, in a few short minutes, given me an incredible gift, a renewed sense of my own creative spirit. He glanced towards the door, as if suddenly remembering the party he'd momentarily escaped. Perhaps we should rejoin the others before your husband sends out a search party. There was a hint of humor in his tone now, a lightness that hadn't been there before. Yes, perhaps we should. I agreed, though a part of me wanted to stay in the quiet sanctuary of the sunroom, to talk more about Eleanor, about painting, about the air. As we walked back towards the livelier part of the house, I felt different. The earlier tension I'd carried about the party, about him being there, had vanished. In its place was a quiet sense of wonder and a burgeoning excitement. He had seen a piece of my soul, and instead of judging it, he had validated it. When we re-entered the living room, the atmosphere seemed subtly changed, or maybe it was me who had changed. Tom looked over, saw us emerging from the hallway together, and I could see a flicker of surprise, maybe a little concern in his eyes. I offered him a warm smile, wider and more genuine than any I'd given all evening. Mr. Caldwell, Arthur, caught Tom's eye and gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture that seemed to convey a simple, reassuring message. Tom's shoulders visibly relaxed. The rest of the evening passed in a pleasant blur. I found myself observing Arthur with new eyes. He was still distinguished, still commanded attention, but now I saw the warmth beneath the reserve, the hint of sadness behind the perceptive gaze. I saw a man who carried his own stories, his own private griefs and passions, just like the rest of us. The conversation we'd shared in the sunroom replayed in my mind, his words echoing, "Don't let the distractions win for too long." It felt like a call to action, a gentle nudge from an unexpected mentor. As the party wound down and guests began to depart, offering their thanks, Arthur approached Tom and me at the door. "Sarah, Tom," he said, his earlier formality slightly softened. "Thank you for a truly wonderful evening. Your home is lovely, and the food was exceptional, Sarah." "We're so glad you could come, Arthur," I replied, using his first name feeling more natural now. Tom shot me a quick, surprised glance, but said nothing. Arthur extended his hand to Tom. "Tom, always a pleasure." Then he turned to me, and for a moment I thought he might shake my hand too. Instead, his eyes met mine, and there was that same look of quiet understanding. "Keep chasing that light, Sarah," he said softly, just for me to hear. And then, with a polite nod, he was gone. I stood at the doorway for a moment, watching his car pull away from the curb, the red tail lights disappearing into the night. The air was cool now, carrying the scent of damp earth and the lingering aroma of charcoal from a neighbor's barbecue. Tom came up behind me, slipping an arm around my waist. "Well," he said, a note of relief in his voice. "That went better than expected." He seemed to actually enjoy himself. He paused. "You two seemed to be having quite the chat in the den. Everything all right?" I leaned back against him, a sigh of contentment escaping me. "Everything is more than all right, Tom," I said, smiling to myself in the darkness.